Hello and welcome. My name is Robert Björkman and I will be your host today. We're pleased to see that we have so many participants once again from all over the world with us today. Today's webinar will be about the recent developments in applying for a refund of Finnish withholding tax on dividends, interest and royalties. I would like to start off with a couple of practicalities. You have a chat box there where you're more than welcome to ask any questions that you might have. We probably won't have time to address all of your questions, but all of them will be answered in due time. After the webinar, you will all receive an email with all the answers. This webinar will also be recorded, so you will also receive a link directly to the recording. With the email, you will also get the slideshow itself, which contains some links to some of the applications. Today, we have two presenters with us. We have Emma Pulkkinen and Maija Jembeck, both senior tax clerks at the International Taxation Unit of the Uusimaa Corporate Tax Office. On today's agenda, we have changes in application form 6163, updated instructions, some review of legislative changes, and lastly, how to apply for a taxed source card for dividend, interest and royalty income. Now, without more ado, I'd like to welcome our first presenter, Emma.
Hi,
Hello.
Robert.
Hello, Emma. So, would you just like to start it off?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And good afternoon, Europe. Good morning, America. And let's get started, shall we? So, the first topic we have here is changes in application form 6163E. And the main change is on the beneficial owner of the dividend, interest or royalty payment. Now, I don't want you to get scared that we've completely changed the form, so I just want to show you what exactly has changed on the form. So, on the second page of the application form, we have this "the undersigned assures that" section. And in that section, the two sentences within the red outlines are the only things that have changed on the application form. So, the first point is that we now ask you to assure us that the applicant is the beneficial owner of the income. And there's some further instructions coming your way just soon. And the second point is that we have changed the wording a little bit on the second. So the applicant has not received or requested any refund from the Finnish payer or the Finnish tax administration. Note that now where the beneficial owner statement is, we used to have a statement on whether you have a permanent establishment in Finland. This has now been removed, and instead we ask you that if you do have a permanent establishment in Finland, you do not use these forms at all. Now, as for the instructions on the beneficial ownership, I won't go into too much detail as you can find all these instructions online, but I will go briefly over some of the crucial points so that you have a good idea of what you have to do. So, this is taken directly from the instructions, and basically you tick the box if the applicant is the beneficial owner of the dividends in questions and related shares were not part of some sort of legal or contractual obligation. Now, this goes into more detail on what those contractual obligations might be, for example, futures contract or something like that. But in any case, we would need an explanation from you on what this arrangement has been, if you feel that there has been some sort of arrangement like this. Now, as you know, our instructions are available in Finnish, Swedish, and English, so don't hesitate to go and have a look. The same instructions basically apply for interest and royalty payments, so you can also find those online, and here you can see those as well briefly. And as you can see, it's a little more simpler than the dividends, because most of, as you know, our applications concern dividends. So, what does this mean for you? Follow the instructions online. So if you need to provide a clarification on the beneficial ownership of the income, leave the box empty. Also, if you are for some reason unsure about the beneficial ownership, it's always best to just leave the box empty. Just make sure that you always provide some sort of explanation on the beneficial ownership. Note also that just because you are leaving the box empty, this does not automatically lead to us rejecting your claim. So if you are unsure, go ahead and leave it empty, because that's always best for us, and then we can ask you for clarification or more information. Now, the explanation itself should contain the circumstances and the details of the arrangement, and the reasons why the applicant believes that they are the beneficial owner of the income. Now, the need to provide this explanation does not depend on the basis of your claim. So whether you are applying on the basis of a tax convention, double taxation treaty, or an EU claim, or for some other reason, this applies to you. So everybody has to take this into consideration. Now, in summary, tick the box if the applicant is the beneficial owner of the income in question, and the related shares were not part of some sort of legal or contractual obligation. Leave it empty in cases when all or some of the shares related to the payment specified on the application form were part of a total return swap, a futures contract, or some other derivative contract, or if the shares were lent to another party or were part of some other legal or contractual obligation. If you're unsure, again, leave the box empty. And just to show you again, this is what we are talking about, this little box here, and that's all. Now, has the applicant previously requested or received a refund? So as you know, we did have this question already on the previous form, but now we just tweaked it a little and changed a few words, so that now we are also asking you whether you have received or requested a refund from the Finnish tax administration. So again, tick the box if the applicant has not received or requested any refund from the Finnish payer or the Finnish tax administration. And again, it's this little box here, so that's all you need to worry about for this question. Now, I'm hoping that you have a few questions for us.
Thank you, Emma. We have actually received some questions already.
Excellent.
The first one would be that if we already integrated the previous version of the form published last year into our system, does that mean that we need to start using this new version, or can we use the older version of the form as well?
Now, as a rule, I would hope that all of our applicants would go online to check that what form they should be using, because that's always the most up-to-date form. Now, of course, if they've already sent us forms with the previous version, we won't ask you to use the new version of the form. But in some cases, we might ask for you to give some more information on the beneficial ownership or something like that.
So in the end, it's simpler to use the newest form.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. A second question is that what happens to applications that have been using the previous version of the application form, which you already basically answered, so.
Basically, yes, but again, I want to stress that we don't exactly throw the applications away or anything like that. So of course, those applications will be processed, and we understand, of course, that this has just recently been published. So if you are still sending with the older version of the form, that's fine. But in the future, we would hope that you would use the new version, because that is, of course, easier for you as well.
Yeah, that's good. A third question for this part is that regarding previous requests and refunds from the payer or the tax administration, does this include requests made through our custodian bank as well?
Yes, so exactly. So through your custodian, you would usually be in contact with the Finnish custodian, so basically the payer's custodian bank. So it's basically in the banking world called a quick refund. And yes, this is exactly what we are looking for as well. So if you have received or requested a quick refund, we want to know that as well.
Okay. Well, thank you for these answers.
Perfect, thank you.
You probably want to continue to your next part.
Yes, exactly. Let's move on. Thank you. Now, I want you to bear with me because this is probably the longest section we have today, as it goes through the updated instructions for filling in the application form 6163E and enclosure 6167E. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about the motivation on why we began updating these instructions. So, as you know, we changed a few things on the form. And at the same time, we thought it would be a good idea that we take into consideration your questions and your concerns, and also see what kind of common mistakes we've been seeing in the application forms. So that you would have, at the first go, you would have a good application form, and we ideally would not need to ask you any questions. So, I think first let's start with some of the common mistakes that we've been seeing in filling in the new forms. First of all, quite often we've seen that you have left the tax identification number field blank. Now, this is a mandatory field, so please do fill that in. And if you, for some reason, can't get a tax identification number, put some other registration number there. Now, this one we see quite a lot, so the address is filled in incorrectly. We understand that different countries have different systems on writing the address, but if you are filling it in incorrectly, that can, of course, lead to, decision letters not reaching you or something like that. So each field should only contain information asked in that field. What does that mean? Basically, we need you to separate the postal address, or otherwise known as the street, postal code, and then post office, which is a rough Finnish translation, and it basically refers to your city or town. Now, as for the banking details, this is mainly for our non-European accounts. We've been seeing that the clearing code has been put in the BIC or SWIFT code field, even though the clearing code actually has its own field, 3.10. So please use the correct field, and that will make our life and your life easier. Now, the dividend information. So quite often we see that you have writing there that does not concern the payment itself. So for example, see attachment. Instead, we would like you to write the actual payment information in those fields, as this makes the processing a lot faster than if you had Excel spreadsheets attached to the application. And as you know, we are allowed to ask you to use a specific form, so that's why we ask you to use 6163E and 6167E. Also, sometimes when we want to be in contact with you, we've often seen that there's no information on who your acting agent is. So that's section 2. Instead, often this information is on a cover letter. Now, cover letters are problematic for the form because it's optically read. So sometimes then the cover letter doesn't, match with the QR code form. So that's why we would ask you to not use cover letters, as some information might be lost. All the relevant information should always be put on the form. So, if there are no contact details on section 2, then all decision letters and information requests will be sent to the client directly. And the same goes for banking details. Do not put these on the cover letter. We've also had cases where the banking details on the form do not match the ones on the cover letter, and then we have to be in contact with you to verify which banking details we should be using. And now this is mainly for our American friends. As we are in Europe, we would want you to use the format day, day, month, month, year, 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 year. Because that is how our system reads the dates. So it can be problematic if you are using month and date first. So all accounting periods, all sort of date information on the payment date, everything should be in this format stated here. Now, as for the main updates to the instructions, I already told you a little bit about the motivation. But we also wanted to make sure that the right people were using the form. So we've added a little bit of instructions on like choosing the right form, basically. Now, 6163E and 6167E are only for foreign corporations and organizations. Individuals have their own application form. Now, 6167E is also used for individuals because it is the enclosure form. But please remember to separate individual clients from corporate clients. Now, if you have a permanent establishment in Finland, you should also not be using this form. There's also further instructions online what you should do in those cases where you do have a permanent establishment in Finland. Now, because I'm sure you've noticed that there's a QR code on the form, so you probably guessed that it is optically read, i.e. it's converted into electronic format. Now that also brings some challenges into what you are allowed to do on the form. So first of all, please do not put any writing or stamps or other markings in the vicinity of the QR code because that affects how our system reads the application form. Also, many of you have asked whether it matters if the paper is one-sided or double-sided. It doesn't matter. You are free to choose whatever is more convenient for you. Similarly, the application forms can be filled in by hand, but I would still recommend that you use typing because you never know if your handwriting is unclear, then some information could be lost. That you write on the application form should not exceed the limits of that field. So for example, the address should not go over the limits of the field. You can, if you wish, also use a sticker to put any information on the form, but those stickers also have to stay within the lines. Now, the only exception to this rule that it should not exceed the limits of the field is the official name of the applicant, because of course we want the full name of the applicant. So for that, if need be, you can exceed the limits of the field. Now, more generally, we've wanted to give you some more examples, improve the readability of the instructions, as well as give you more details so that you know how to apply it to your situation. Now, also, our new postal address, I hope, is already familiar to most of you, but just for clarification, please use this address when posting new applications. If for some reason you need a street address for courier service, you can use the following street address. But don't worry, if you don't have the A with the dots, you can replace those with A's. It will still find its way to us. I'd also want to go through a little bit where you can find these instructions. I hope most of you already know where they are, but just in case. So first, you would go to vero.fi or tax.fi, and in the search field, you would write 6163, which is the number of the form. Essentially, that will take you here. Hopefully, the options provided by the search field should give you the options of the instructions. Alternatively, the options might read the application form itself. So once you go to the page with the application forms, you will also find a link to the instructions. Now, I thought it might be a good idea to go through some of the major changes we've done to the instructions step by step. So in case you have the application form next to you, I would recommend that you take it out now. So section 1, which concerns the applicant. The applicant's official name. This should be the same as it is on the certificate of residence. So please don't add any additional information on there that doesn't belong there. Now, this has caused some confusion with some of you. Accounting period or financial year or even fiscal year, if that is a more familiar word. It's typically the calendar year, but we've also seen a lot of variation. So, for example, starting in March or starting in September, etc. And again, I would hope and ask you to write it in the form date, month, year. Now, whether the applicant is stock exchange listed or non-listed. As you can see, this is taken directly from our instructions on the definition of what stock exchange listed means. So just go through that definition, and if you think you apply to that, then tick the box for yes and tick no if you are non-listed. Now, the ISIN code field has often been filled with the details of the Finnish payer. That's not what it is meant for, so this is mainly for cases when the applicant is stock exchange listed and you would have an ISIN code, then that is where you would write that ISIN code. If you don't have an ISIN code, just leave it empty. And again, the address. So if the applicant doesn't have an agent, all correspondence will be sent to the address in this section. And again, I'd like to stress that you should be filling in the address field by field. So postal address, postal code, and post office all separately. And the country of residence, first of all, cannot be Finland. And please use the ISO 3166 standard, as this is how our system reads the code and then identifies your country of residence. Next, the tax identification number. So, as I already said, this is mandatory piece of information. However, if for some reason the applicant cannot receive one, I would want you to provide an explanation as well as some other registration number. We've seen this mostly with some investment funds that they cannot get a tax identification number. As for the applicant's legal entity, if you feel like none of the options that we've listed apply to you, then always choose other and then give a more detailed description in 1.17. Previous refund decisions. So has the applicant previously applied for a refund? So if you have these previous decisions, please write down the registration or decision number from that decision letter, so we can always refer back to those as well. And as you know, the grounds for refund can differ. So we have the tax convention claims, EU claims, as well as some other claims. Now, if you don't find that you apply to tax convention or EU claim, you can always tick other and provide more explanation. There's some more detailed instructions on what these three different ones entail online, so go and have a look at the instructions after the webinar. Now, as for section 2, which is the information on the agent. When the applicant is represented by an agent, such as a bank or consultant, the decision and information requests will be sent to the address in section 2 instead of section 1. So, if you have several agents, however, we would want you to only write down the contact information of the agent that the decision and information request should be sent to, regardless of whether the application form itself has been signed by a third agent, for example. Please also always remember to attach a power of attorney. And you might have realized that we've also started asking you about the right of signature a bit more. So for your benefit, it's going to be a much swifter processing if you enclose some sort of document that shows that the person or persons signing the application form or the power of attorney has the right to sign on behalf of the company or organization. So the probably most used example is the local trade register. So that usually is what we have seen, and that usually has information on who has the right to represent the company. Section 3, the banking details. So we have a bit of different instructions depending on whether the account itself is in the single euro payments area or outside it. So first of all, for our within single euro payments area accounts, what we need from you is the name of the account holder, the bank account number in IBAN format, and the bank's BIC code. And we would also recommend that you provide some sort of reference, as this will allow you to better locate the payment on a bank statement, for example. Of course, it's not mandatory, but again, highly recommended. Now, bank accounts outside the single euro payments area, we also need, in addition to name of the account holder and the bank account number, we also need the clearing code, as well as the name and address of the bank. And just as for previous applicants or bank accounts, we would also recommend that you provide your own reference. And please remember that this reference can contain both letters and numbers, and it is completely up to you what it looks like. Now, section 4, information on the income, and this is mainly for dividends. So, instead, if you have a return of capital, you can tick dividend and then attach a detailed description of the nature of the payment. We'll get back to interest and royalty payments later on. As you know, they have their own section on the form. Now, 5.1. We've seen some mistakes in this field as well. So whether the applicant received the dividends through direct shareholding, through a fund, or through a partnership. Now, we have an example here just to give you an idea of what we're looking for. So, for example, if we have an American LP form partnership and the dividend was paid to the applicant through the partnership, then tick the box through a partnership and fill the details on the partnership in boxes 5.3 to 5.6. If instead the applicant is the partnership itself, then of course you would put direct shareholding, and then we would need a list of all the different partners. We've also had some confusion with point 5.7, the investment assets, and please note that this question only refers to applicants that are financial institutions, insurance companies, or pension institutions. And if these dividends are part of its investment asset. You are none of the above, just leave the boxes blank. And to continue, now information on the payer. We've conducted a list of all the kind of most known Finnish dividend paying companies online. Again, I've provided a link here that you can go and look at later, but it's also at the very end of the instructions online. And we would ask you that you fill in the name of the payer in the form that it appears on this list. And we would also ask you to remember to note whether the dividend paying company is stock exchange listed or non-listed. Again, the same rules apply as it did for when we were asking about whether the applicant is stock exchange listed or non-listed. The date of payment actually refers to the date that the payer has specified at the AGM. So it is not the day that you receive the dividend on your account necessarily. For the payment details themselves, we need the gross dividend amount, the amount of tax originally withheld, and the amount of refund requested. So even if you have already applied for a partial refund and received it, we still need to know the original amount of tax withheld, and this you would write in point 5.14. Now, one of the most important questions that we've now started asking that is not on the older versions of the application form is on intermediary banks. So we need a list of all intermediary banks, agents, or other intermediaries that have handled the dividend payment. Now, if, for example, different payers have different audit trails, you can always clarify this in a separate attachment. And remember that this is a mandatory question for all applicants. All applications need to write this. And specifically, we would ask you to be careful with the location of the intermediary. So if you're writing down the name of the bank, we would also need to know whether that bank is located in London, Luxembourg, Frankfurt, etc. And as for enclosure form 6167E, the payment details must be provided on these forms. So again, no more Excel spreadsheets. The only exception being pension insurance institutions and life insurance companies. But again, there's more detailed information on how we deal with those in the online instructions. But again, keep using 6167E and 6163E. Now, just for clarification, I've conducted an example of intermediary banks and agents. So if we start with our Finnish payer, the most common being Nokia, of course. Now, Nokia has some sort of Finnish custodian bank that takes care of its accounts. And this Finnish custodian bank then pays forward the dividend to a foreign custodian bank. The foreign custodian bank then pays the dividend to the applicant's bank, and finally it reaches the applicant. So what would you write down in 5.16? Basically, you would write the name of the Finnish custodian bank, the foreign custodian bank, and the applicant's bank. And again, this is just an example, so instead of 3, you might need to write down 7 intermediary banks. Nevertheless, we need to know every single one of them. Now, as I said, I would come back to interest payments and royalties. So they have their own section, which is section 6. If your application concerns interest or royalty payments, then fill in the details here. Don't write them in the dividend section. And I would ask you to follow similar instructions as you would for dividend payments. So see the instructions for points 5.9 to 5.15. And now finally, the undersigned section. Has the applicant previously received or requested a refund? Again, we already went through this in the first section of the webinar. Is the applicant the beneficial owner of the income? And again, the right to sign. So we will ask you to provide documentation showing the right to sign, and you will have to specify whether that is through the applicant is signing the form. And then the certificate of residence. This is again a mandatory attachment. So older versions of the form used to have a section where you could just put a stamp. That is no longer possible. You have to attach a separate certificate of residence. Now again, if for some reason you cannot receive one of these certificates of residence, leave the box blank and then attach some sort of other registration document, as well as an explanation on why you can't receive a certificate of residence. And I'm just very briefly going to go through this because this does not concern the majority of you. But again, these instructions are online. So we have a little bit of technical things that umbrella funds and pension insurance institutions and life insurance companies take into consideration. But again, like I said earlier, 5.16 is a mandatory question, so it would apply for these applicants as well. And now I'm hoping you have even more questions for me.
Thank you once again, Emma.
Thank you.
Yes, we do have questions actually regarding this topic. The first one being, which address should we use when sending our responses to our information requests?
Yes, that is a separate address from what I showed earlier. So when you receive an information request, you will also receive a cover letter with a QR code and it will also give you the address that you should send that request or response to. So that's basically PO Box 900, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, so look at the cover letter.
Exactly.
Yeah. Then the second question. The official name of the applicant has changed in between dividend payment years. Which name should be written on the form 6163E?
We would ask you that you use the most recent or the current name of the applicant, but of course that you provide explanation on what has happened. So what the name change is, what the previous name was, and if that has had any effect on the legal structure of the applicant as well.
Okay, yeah. For a third question is that can we also go over the documentation requirements as well as if it's originals or copies that are required for each form?
We would always ask you first to attach originals, especially when it comes to the certificate of residence. But if for some reason you cannot get the originals, then of course send the copies and then attach an explanation to that copy.
Okay, that's quite clear. So if you don't mind, we could continue on to the third topic for today.
Perfect. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
So this is my last part, and that is the review of the effects of the 2017 legislative changes on applying for a refund of Finnish withholding tax. Now, you have already hopefully received an information bulletin on this last year, and some of these things were also touched in the previous webinar, I believe. But we think it's a good idea to go through them again now that the legislative changes are actually in place. So we are now living in 2017. Now, as I already said earlier, the use of application form 6163E and enclosure 6167E are now compulsory. So, starting from the beginning of the year, the applicant must use the form stated by the Finnish Tax Administration. And again, if you are unsure what that form is, always go online and write down the numbers of the forms, and that will be the most up-to-date version of the form. Of course, if there are any major changes, we will always inform you about that. But again, check online. So, what that means for us is that you use 6163E and, when applicable, 6167E. So, this means that older versions of any form will not be accepted. If we do receive these older versions of the form, we will be sending a letter to you asking that you use the new form in the future. So we won't again be getting rid of any of the older applications, but you never know what we decide. So please keep looking at and keep using the new form. Also, if you are sending an appeal, you will need to use a specific form. So that would be form 6168E. And again, I want to also stress the benefits of the new form. So it means swifter processing, and it allows for us to easier locate your application and confirm its arrival. So basically now we can just check on our computers whether we have received your application, whereas in the past we had to go through all of our papers to see if we have received that. And again, I want to stress, please do not use cover letters. Again. And now one of the major changes that happened also in the beginning of the year are the shorter deadlines. So we have now moved, starting from dividends paid this year, to a 3-year deadline. So in the case that excess tax has been withheld at source, the taxpayer may ask for a refund during the 3 calendar years that follow. So the New Year deadline is only applied in dividends now paid this year and moving forward. So for example, 2016 is still on the old deadline. So here we have an example, just to give you an idea of what this means in deadlines as in years and dates. So for example, If you are paid a dividend in 2017, i.e. for the financial year 2016, and tax at source is withheld, and you want to apply for a refund based on the tax convention between Finland and your country of residence, then you may send us your refund application in 2018, 2019, or 2020. So as you also know, we do not process applications during the year that the tax was withheld. So what does this mean? This means that your application should arrive at the tax administration by the 31st of December 2020. Now, an even bigger change has been the shorter deadline for appeals. So any applicant can appeal any decision made on the application for refund of Finnish withholding tax. But starting from this year, that appeal period that used to be 5 years is now shortened to 60 days. And this 60 days is counted from the date when the beneficiary is expected to have received the decision letter. So the new appeal period applies to refund decisions made after the 1st of January 2017. Again, I have an example here. I won't go into too much detail on it, but as you can see, the date that we expect that you have received the letter is 7 days after it has been posted. So if, for example, the mail date is 24th of January, then we expect you to have received it on the 31st of January. And then that would mean that the appeal period would fall on the Saturday, 1st of April. And since that is a weekend, then the following business day, which is Monday, the 3rd of April, would be the final day that you could lodge an appeal with us. And that is this section. Now, do we have any questions?
Thank you once more.
Thank you.
And actually, yeah, we do have a couple of questions regarding this topic as well. The first being, which deadline applies to dividends paid out last year, that being 2016?
So that's still in the old deadline, so you still have the 5 years to apply for refund. So again, the 3-year deadline is only starting this year. So basically when you're filling in your refund applications next year.
Okay. And then a second question is that what kind of documents should be attached to an appeal?
So first of all, you need to have the correct form, which is 6168E. And then any additional supporting documentation, and this really depends on why you are appealing the decision. So if for example, you forgot to send us some sort of attachment for the refund application and we then rejected your claim, then of course we need that documentation for the appeal.
Yeah, that's well natural.
Yeah.
Okay. But thank you, Emma.
Thank you.
It has been nice having you here.
Yep.
And I think it's time to welcome our second presenter. Welcome, Maija.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Robert.
Hello, Maija. Would you just like to get on to your topic?
Yes, sure.
Okay. Well.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon and good morning for all of you who are online. So, today I'm here to tell you how to apply for tax at source card for dividend, interest and royalty income. So firstly, what is tax at source card? The tax at source card allows the payer to withhold the correct amount of tax during the payment year. Either already at the original time of withholding or during the payment year through the payer's custodian bank. One tax at source card, several income payers. The same tax at source card can be used. So there is no need to apply for separate tax at source cards for each dividend payer. After receiving the tax at source card, there is no more need for separate refund applications. You can apply for the tax at source card for annual basis So, in other words, the applicant can receive the tax at source card for the whole calendar year. So, what do I need? First-time applicants. Of course, we need the application form 6202E. The certificate of residence for the year of application. For example, if you are applying the tax at source card for year 2017, the certificate of residence for year 2017 should be attached. If for some reason you cannot receive the certificate of residence from your local tax authorities, please provide an explanation as well as the registration document. And also describe the basis for your application and what is the tax percentage you are applying for. For example, a German open contractual investment fund sees itself comparable to Finnish tax-exempt investment fund and is applying for zero tax at source card. So what do we need? Please describe in the explanation attached to your application how the German fund is comparable to Finnish investment fund. And also attach any supporting documents to your explanation, as you would to refund application, fund prospectus, fund registration document, Bescheinigung in German, and so on. And here's an example for investment funds. So the following example gives you an idea of the sort of information that is required. The question below refers to type of information we are looking for with regards to investment funds. So here's a couple of points. As you can see, there is quite many, but this is an example, and here as an underlined you can see some of the most important points. So, who can investment in the fund? Who does the investor buy and sell the fund shares? Is the fund supervised by the government officials? How is the fund and its shareholders or unit holders taxed in the domicile country? Is the fund in question open-ended with variable capital, or is it close-ended fund? And note, this is only an example. More information might be required. And do the next slide. What do I need with the previous decisions? We need the application form 6202E to apply. And of course, the certificate of residence for the year that you are applying. So, once again, if you're applying the tax at source card for year 2017, a certificate of residence for year 2017 should be attached. If for some reason you cannot receive the certificate of residence from your local tax authorities, provide an explanation as well as registration document or comparable proof to appropriate registration with the authorities of your country. And also confirm that the circumstances resulting in refund decisions or previous tax at source have not changed. This is the important one. And if the circumstances have changed, outline these in the separate attachment and or attach any other relevant documents. So either attach the previous refund decision or the tax at source card, or refer to date and or reference on the letter that you have received from the Finnish tax administration. And here you can see the part of the form 6202E. And the one with the red outlining, there you can choose if you have requested the Finnish tax card previously. So please tick in if you have or if you haven't. And also there is the requested validity for the card, which is usually from the end of year until the, from the start of the year until the end of the year. And of course, details of the on the applicant. And here's another part of the application. With the red outlining, there is a column for the person to contact for more information. So you should fill in who you would like us to contact if there is some further questions or we need some further information. And also, here is the part of the application form with the red cross on it. So this same form is also used for business construction, building and installation, for example. So you can leave this part empty if you don't have business activity in Finland. And here's some more about the application form. What you should fill in if you apply for the tax at source card for dividend, interest or royalty income. Firstly, the details on the applicant, then whether you have requested for the Finnish tax at source card previously. So does the applicant have previous tax at source cards? Write down the date on the tax at source card. So mark it in the application. A requested validity for, well, typically it's the calendar year, so from the beginning of the year until the end of the year. And also the person to contact for more information. This part refers to the applicant's representative who should be contacted if further information is required. Note, if you wish for the tax at source card to be sent to another address than the one on the application, for example, the applicant's acting agent, please specify this either in the person to contact for more information field or in the cover letter, so we reach the correct person. And lastly, here's a summary for all the slides and important points that we went through. So, fill in the application form only insofar as it is relevant to your situation. The same application form is used for the tax at source card regarding the trade income, for example, building contract. Remember to attach details for any previous refund decisions or tax at source cards, as well as any other relevant attachments. And make sure to specify if the tax at source card should be sent to your agent rather than the address you have specified to yourself on the application form. And also, the form 6202E is currently not optically read, so in other words, converted into digital form. This means that you can easily write down the additional information that does not fit in the application form in other attachment if necessary. So you can fill in some extra information to the cover letter if necessary. And also, if more information is required, the tax administration will be in direct contact with the person you have specified in the form. And also note, the tax at source card is provided in Finnish or Swedish. However, applicant can request for separate explanation of the content of the card in English. So, also in English. So, do you have any questions for me?
Thank you, Maija.
Thank you.
That was really informative. And actually,
good to hear.
yeah, absolutely. And we have some questions for you regarding these tax at source cards.
Yes.
The first being that what should be attached to an application for taxed source card?
Of course, the application itself,
Yeah.
and also the certificate of residence, and the grounds for your applications. And if there is some other documents that would possibly be required, that should be also attached to your application.
Okay, so that sounds easy enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. The second question is that can you apply for a taxed source card in the middle of a dividend year?
Yes, you can send the application in the middle of the dividend year as well. And you can apply the refund through your own custodian bank via quick refund.
Okay, that's great to know. How long is processing time for a taxed source card?
Well, usually the taxed source cards, the applications will be taking under processing within couple of weeks after receiving the applications.
Okay.
But
So
of course, if there is something else that we need, it might have an effect in the processing time.
okay, so taken in the process in a couple of weeks, and then it depends on if you have all the information needed.
Yes.
Okay. Then one more practical question is that where should these applications be sent?
Okay, I can show you.
Okay.
There is some of the important links in the end of this slideshow. And from here, let me just open this.
Yeah.
You can see that there's more information in our website. And here is the application for taxed source card. And from here you can see send the formats to, and here is the exact address. And of course you will receive all the information after the slideshow as well.
Yeah. Yeah, well, thank you, Maja. That was all the questions for this time. I think it was informative.
Okay, thank you.
So, okay. Well, that was all for today. I hope you've had as informative a day as I have had. Just a recap. So, all of this information will be sent to you by email after this webinar, once we've compiled all the answers to the questions. You will also receive the link to the recording as well as this slideshow. You might have seen that there's some links in the slideshow as well, which will take you directly to these application forums. So, with that, I'd like to wish everybody who's been watching a nice day or evening or maybe good night. Thank you.
Thank you.